We'd like to go ahead. You have two witnesses, I see, 2 minutes each. But at this point in time, opening statement, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members. First, I'd like to begin by thanking the Judiciary Committee for working with my office on this bill. AB 1510 is a response to egregious acts of sexual misconduct that occurred for almost 30 years on USC's campus by former sole full-time gynecologist, Dr. George Tyndall. In May of 2018, the LA Times broke the story as a cover-up by USC regarding sexual misconduct of student patients by Tyndall at USC's Student Health Center. He started at USC in 1989, and over the years, it is estimated that over 14,000 female students were impacted. In his assaults on thousands of women, he made racist remarks toward women of color and international students. After the university's investigation, USC quietly paid Tyndall to go away and failed to disclose information about the findings of their investigation to the students, to the Medical Board of California, or to law enforcement. This bill allows victims of sexual assault their day in court by exempting from the current statute of limitations claims of sexual assault at student health centers that otherwise would have been barred prior to January 1st, 2020. We have countless victims without recourse, and these include the current and former USC students who were victimized by Dr. Tyndall. Failure to disclose and bring to light complaints of Dr. Tyndall's sexual assault on students allowed him to continue to assault thousands of women for years. It is vital that survivors are provided with an opportunity to have their day in court, and this bill will provide an additional year for survivors to seek justice. Here to testify on behalf of this bill are USC survivors Nicole Haynes and Mai Mizuno. We also have attorney Holly Boyer to answer any legal questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Nicole Haynes, and I'm here to speak in support of AB 1510. During my time at USC, I served as captain of the track team, specializing in the heptathlon, which is 7 events competed over a 2-day period. I was the Pac-10 champion, silver medalist at the NCAA championships, competed at the Olympic trials, and in the decade after graduation became a pro track athlete. After retiring, I became a sports journalist and for a time covered USC sports. I am a Trojan to the core, and that's what's made coming forward to speak about the abuse I suffered at the hands of Dr. Tyndall so incredibly difficult. I'm an overall very healthy person. I very rarely get sick. Actually never missed a day of school from kindergarten through high school due to illness. So that's why the memory of the encounter I had with Dr. Tyndall is so vivid. It was in 1995 during my junior year in college. I went to the SC Health Center because I was experiencing diarrhea and the most excruciating stomach pain I had ever felt. It was there that I came under the care of Dr. Tyndall. I was in so much pain, I just wanted to get to the bottom of my illness so that I could be treated and the pain would just go away. When I was told to get undressed and to put my legs up in the stirrups, I complied. The experience, it wasn't easy by any means. In addition to the almost blinding stomach pain that I was experiencing, I was put through the ordeal of a full vaginal exam. That was my first gynecological visit, and I was a virgin at the time. After he was done with my exam, he came up and said, "You had food poisoning. Go back to your dorm, and it'll pass in a couple hours." I was very confused why I had to go through a full vaginal exam just for a simple food poisoning diagnosis. But I trusted the doctor, and I didn't question his actions. But nothing about that day sat well in my spirit. I've been to millions of doctor's appointments, and I remember this one like it was yesterday. But it wasn't until I started reading about the stories of Dr. Tyndall last year in the newspaper that my confusion about what happened to me in 1995 became crystal clear. Dr. Tyndall violated me. I was put through the ordeal of a full vaginal exam for something totally unrelated to my disease. He preyed on my youth and my naivete. Like over 700 of my Trojan sisters, I was sexually assaulted by someone who was supposed to be my trusted doctor. A doctor that USC kept employed and allowed to treat young women like me long after reports of abuse had been reported. My mother was abused as a child, and she always impressed upon me if somebody ever violated me to speak up. I now have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm constantly talking with her about how she should and shouldn't be touched. So I had to speak up and come forward, and not just for me, but for my mom and for the hundreds of USC women who have sat in their shame, fear, and mistrust because of the abuse they suffered by someone who is supposed to care for them. The system is not working when this type of behavior is allowed to continue for over 30 years. The system is broken when those good nurses who reported this horrendous conduct were met with inaction, or even worse, a cover-up. The systemic failure is continuing, and now, as we try to bring our case to a court of law, the entity that allowed the abuse, USC, is claiming that archaic deadlines and statutes of limitations limit our rights and our voices. I remember when the whole Larry Nassar, USA Gymnastics story broke, I was sickened. I couldn't believe USA Gymnastics allowed this man to violate these young women for so many years. And me being an athlete, I was totally into it. I was watching every day. I saw those young girls testify, and I was so proud that they got up there. Lo and behold, I'm in the same situation, and I never got my day in court. I never got to face this man and ask SC why you allowed this to happen. AB 1510 gives survivors like me who have come forward a chance to hold those who harmed us accountable. It gives us a choice. We can choose our own path to justice. USC's undergraduate student government voted unanimously to pass a resolution to support AB 1510. I urge you to join me, my Asian sisters, my African American sisters, my Latino sisters, my Anglo sisters. Please, please support this important bill. Oh, and one last request. I have copies of the USC resolutions here. Can the sergeant please distribute?
We'll ask the sergeant to do that. Thank you very much, and thank you for your
so
testimony.
much.
And you're here to answer any specific questions, or did you want to testify as well? All right, please. Briefly, if you would. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Mai Mizuno, and I'm here today in support of AB 1510. I was a freshman when I went to the USC Health Center for a consultation about the birth control method I was taking. I requested a female gynecologist, but was told that Dr. Tyndall was the only campus gynecologist. When I arrived for my appointment, Dr. Tyndall immediately asked me if I was Japanese. "I can tell by your last name," he said. Dr. Tyndall then asked if I had done a pelvic examination before. I had not. He reacted as if this was ludicrous and insisted I needed to have one done that day. I believed in his credibility as a doctor, so I allowed him to take me to the examination room. I didn't realize that there was supposed to be a chaperone in the room, and I certainly didn't realize what was about to happen. As he pulled my legs apart and secured my feet in stirrups, he started talking about East Asia again. And as he started his examination, he commented on the aesthetics of my body. He touched my breasts, and then, as he inserted his fingers inside of me over and over, he asked me what my sex life was like, how I felt during sex, if I enjoyed sex, and if I had a boyfriend. I was 19 years old. I didn't know that at the time, USC had already received decades of complaints against this doctor. I didn't know that USC had hired a team of medical experts to evaluate him. I didn't know that their report concluded that Dr. Tyndall preyed on Asian students who, because of cultural reasons, are less likely to recognize harassment or lodge a complaint. I didn't know any of this, but USC did. And still, they did not notify law enforcement or the state medical board of its internal report. 2 months ago, I met with fellow survivors of Dr. Tyndall's sexual abuse. There were women in their 60s to women in their early 20s like me. Our only common denominators should have been that we identified as women and as Trojans. But all of that was overshadowed by the fact that we also shared the same abuser. Dr. Tyndall's abuse continued year after year and decade after decade. I spoke with women like Ms. Hayes, who had reported their abuse to USC before I was even born. I am still in shock. To know the numbers is one thing. To meet the woman, to know the woman, and to consider them my sister survivors is another. By the time others chose to listen, it was too late. But with AB 1510, we have a chance to allow my fellow survivors to at least access legal justice. Last month, I became a graduate of the University of Southern California and joined the ranks of other alumni. In doing so, I have reflected as to what it means to be a part of the Trojan family. I have come to the conclusion that to be a Trojan means to truly embody our school motto, to not just fight on, but to fight on for something that matters. In this case, to stand with survivors and to demand justice. I hope you will support our fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support, please come forward with your name and affiliation.
Madam Chair, members, Sarah Flox, California Labor Federation, in support.
Thank you.
Daniel Gutierrez on behalf of the Consumer Federation of California, in support.
Thank you.
Shane Gussman on behalf of the Teamsters and the thousands of healthcare workers we represent in strong support.
Thank you.
McKenna Jenkins on behalf of the California Civil Liberties Advocacy and strong support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Megan Subers on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers in support.
Thank you.
I'm Christopher McMorrin. I'm an undergraduate student government senator from USC on behalf of the undergraduate student body in support.
Thank you.
My name is Haley Garland. I'm a student senator at USC, speaking on behalf of the undergraduate student body and strong support.
Thank you very much.
Stephanie Goldman with the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges in support.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support? All right, before we get to the witnesses in opposition, the mother in me says, do not blame yourselves. This was not your fault. With that, let's have the opposition come forward. You can take seats at the table. Two witnesses, please. Hold 1 second there. Sergeant's delivering these documents, so we on? Go ahead and...
Hello?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Michelle Rubalcaba on behalf of the University of Southern California and in opposition to AB 1510. Shortly after the first federal class action lawsuit was filed, the university entered into mediation to begin to put together a comprehensive settlement package that would compensate every single woman who saw Dr. Tyndall. It also included sweeping institutional reforms that make USC a safer environment for all USC students. USC has committed $215 million in a federal settlement that will provide every woman who saw Dr. Tyndall a private, respectful, and expedited remedy. Months after negotiations had been underway, and only after this settlement was filed in federal lawsuit, was AB 1510 introduced. The authors claim that the bill is necessary in order for women who are currently barred by the statute of limitations to receive compensation for their injuries. This bill is not necessary to accomplish that goal. The author has also stated that this bill is necessary because USC has engaged in fraudulent concealment. We dispute that assertion, and even if that were to be the case, current law holds a remedy in those cases. So then why are we here? Why does this particular settlement require legislative intervention? It is our position that the judicial system is the appropriate venue to determine whether or not this settlement is fair and reasonable. And just last week, on Thursday, we had a federal judge who, after reviewing reams of evidence, of data, of statement, granted this settlement preliminary approval, made public comments that this settlement is, in fact, fair and reasonable. This is why USC opposes AB 1510 and the dangerous precedent that it sets. Your analysis accurately states that, yes, the legislature has the discretion to retroactively open up statute of limitations. However, it cautions, as do the courts, that that discretion should be used sparingly. This situation does not rise to that level.
Thank you.
Oh, can I just really wrap up?
If you would. Well, they got more time. They had a story to tell. You're defending the situation. I want to give you time, so
I'll wrap
it up, please.
All right. So, I lost my train of thought. I would ask for you to consider whether or not, if it is something extraordinary, then why is it limited to private universities? In addition, I would ask that you consider whether the legislature should have the role of supplanting a thoughtful judicial analysis that has determined that this settlement is fair and reasonable. And with that, I would ask that you vote no on AB 1510.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Next witness, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Excuse me. I am Dr. Elizabeth Sherelle Davis. I am the president of the Sacramento chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women Sacramento's chapter's mission is to advocate on behalf of African American girls and women to promote leadership development and economic empowerment. That mission is what brings me before this committee today on behalf of our coalition, which also includes the Frederick Douglass Foundation excuse me, of California, the Douglass Institute, and the California clergy and their congregation. The actions of Dr. George Tyndall at USC is distasteful. The women who have been victimized by this man deserve justice. The current conversation happening here in California and across the country surrounding sexual harassment and assault is long overdue. I am pleased the legislator is looking into this matter seriously. However, these conversations largely exclude various victims, more specifically victims of color. While I'm grateful that AB 1510 has brought forth a dialogue on this important issue, I appreciate the spirit of this legislation. AB 1510, as currently written, comes up short for our community and, frankly, for the entire state of California. As written, AB 1510 does nothing for students attending the California community colleges, the University of California's campuses, or the California State University campuses. Together, USC, the University of California, and the California State University campuses educate more than 700,000 students. I agree with Brennan Hill, who wrote in the USA Today this week, as it relates to her experience as a USC victim, that she hopes to be able to make a difference through legislation for all women, victims and survivors. Today, we have the opportunity to achieve that goal, but unfortunately the bill is short, has fallen short. Today, I'm proud to be here to advocate on behalf of so many that remain in the shadows. I want to thank the Assembly members and the Senate who has met with us to discuss this important issue. And I hope that this committee will do the right thing and amend AB 1510 to support all survivors. And finally, I would like to conclude with a sincere question to the committee. Why does this bill not include victims from public institutions, and why not amend this bill to support all survivors?
Thank you for your testimony. All right, other witnesses in opposition, if you'd step forward, name and affiliation, please.
Hi, I'm Valerie Spake, UCLA graduate. I want you to consider opposing this bill unless amended.
Thank you. Next witness.
Alana Logo, Los Rios Community Colleges, unless amended, opposing.
Thank you.
Emily Rivers, resident of Merced County and previous attendee of Merced College, oppose.
Thank you.
Carolyn Mullins, resident of Sacramento County, graduate of the University of California at Davis, and opposed unless amended to include all survivors.
Thank you.
My name is Aaron Willis. I'm in opposition to AB 1510 unless it includes all survivors.
Thank you.
My name is Evelyn Frazier. I'm a graduate of Chapman University. I'm opposed to this bill unless it includes all survivors.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erica Willis, and I'm in opposition of this bill unless it's amended to all survivors.
Thank you.
My name is Kendall Cornelius. I'm a recent graduate of Sacramento State University, and I oppose this bill unless it includes all survivors.
Thank you.
Sarah Foster, resident of Sacramento and a graduate of UC Berkeley, class of 55. I oppose this bill for all the reasons given. It has to include all survivors.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
My name is Mary Ann Holst, and I'm a UC Davis alumni, and I'm here in opposition of this bill.
Thank you.
Kara Tufts, I'm early childhood.
Can we, can't hear you. Can you move a little closer?
Oppose unless it's amended for all victims.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Louisa Boudreau, graduate of Santa Barbara, and I'm opposed unless amended.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Regard. I am a resident here in Elk Grove, also graduate of UCLA, and I suggest that we amend the bill in order for it to be passed.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin McGarry, Chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of California. We oppose unless it's amended to include all survivors.
Thank you.
My name is Juanita Greer, and I reside in Solano County. I am a pastor and also oppose this bill unless amended for all survivors.
Thank you.
Miriam Waterman, and I've been a victim of San Jose State, and I agree with them, unless it's amended, I oppose.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Leanna Taylor. I'm a graduate of UC Davis and a mother to daughters. I oppose this unless it's amended, and I am so sorry for your experiences.
Thank you.
Anita Johnson, resident of Sacramento County. I oppose the bill.
Thank you.
My name is Phyllis Johnson. I'm a resident of El Dorado County, and I oppose this bill unless it includes all survivors.
Thank you.
I'm Regina Boylan. I'm a resident of Sacramento County, and I oppose AB 1510 unless it applies to all survivors.
Thank you very much.
Denise Smith, retired law enforcement, oppose.
Thank you.
I don't know if this would be the appropriate time for the in-between.
Are you all right?
Sorry, Alex Graves with the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities. We don't have an opposed position on the bill, but we do have two concerns I just wanted to briefly share. One of which has been mentioned, I think, by a number of folks before me, and the other is just, for a number of our schools, the challenge to potentially go back up to 30 years in gathering evidence. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses opposed or any witnesses neutral on this?
Pastor Bruce Rivers, Los Banos, California, Merced County, former student at Monterey Peninsula Junior College, Laney Junior College, and Cal State University Northridge, which had the #1 Division women's track team back in the day. And I know there's some more Tyndales out there because I heard stories as I was going to college in the 70s, 41 years ago. And I oppose this bill unless it includes all state universities, all UCs,
Thank you.
and all junior colleges.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's bring it back to the table. This is obviously a very emotional issue. You know, all of us as women have been through what is almost inherently a somewhat humiliating experience going through a gynecological exam. It is among the most vulnerable moments in one's life, and to have endured this experience is just takes my breath away. And so I appreciate the testimony of all of you. They're meaningful, and I know that there are others that this kind of treatment of women has gone on since the beginning of time, and hopefully now we're going to stop it. It's just not, it's beyond distasteful. I thought that was one of the understatements of the day. It is absolutely unacceptable behavior. So your testimony coming forward really means a lot, and I think that we can all agree that the abuse here was just abominable, and we have to do everything we can to make sure this just doesn't happen ever again going forward, and certainly looking back to the fact that we have clearly documented evidence of this man's behavior over the course of 30 years. I think what is of particular concern, and I would ask the author to follow up on this, is the fact that not only did this happen, but that the university was well aware of this and allowed it to continue for years. That, we know there are perpetrators out there. We know there are deviants. We know there are people who will take advantage of women or young people, vulnerable people. But for an institution which has the responsibility to protect us, whether it's through making sure we get a quality education, whether it's the provisions of Title IX, whether it's just basic human decency, we have an enormous lapse that occurred here. And so, excuse me, we sometimes hear that from people who are individuals, but not people who are here as witnesses. So please, thank you. So we know that there's been a failure of this institution. There have probably been failures of others, and perhaps we will learn of those going forward. But the question now before us is whether this bill is the right way to respond to the issues before us. Statutes of limitations. I practiced law for 22 years. I'm recovering. Been in recovery for about the same length of time. We have members of this body here who have practiced law, and those who have been involved in public policy for periods of time, even if they haven't. So it is understood that statutes of limitations and our reliance on them are foundational to our justice system. We don't want cases to get too stale. Witnesses' memories change. People die. So having statutes of limitations are a foundation of our judicial process, as ancient as, or existed as long back, as far back as ancient Rome. And while the law is clear that it is within the power of the legislature to revive expired civil claims, we've done that before. We've done that with the mistreatment, the horrific treatment within the church, and sexual predators that the church knew about for decades, if not hundreds of years. We've done it there. So we have, in fact, revived expired civil claims in the past. The question today is whether it's justified in this circumstance. I think that's the question before us. And I think that the situations and the claims that are covered by this bill do warrant this extraordinary relief. Reading these stories over and over again, you are not alone, and as I said earlier, this is not your fault. And young women, women who've experienced this, should not bear the guilt of this mistreatment. And yet we as women do. I don't know why, but we do. Whether we're the victim of sexual abuse, rape, harassment, domestic violence, somehow or other we feel that it's our responsibility, and it is not. But it is the responsibility of these universities and any institution that is aware that this is happening to take immediate steps to end it. And so I don't make that decision lightly because, again, as someone who believes so firmly in the judicial process, this is a situation that I think begs the response. And in response to the concern about the fact that there's a $215 million settlement on the table, if the settlement is fair and reasonable for victims, they won't opt out. They'll participate. But this bill, as I understand it, gives those who have time-barred claims a choice to take the settlement offer or to seek justice in the courts pursuant to the revival provision. They have that opportunity. I frankly think $215 million for USC is a drop in the bucket, but it is a settlement that was offered, and the court did approve the settlement. And so be it for those who choose, and maybe for good reason. But I think for those for whom the statute has run, if they want to assert their claims, given what we know and given what the University of Southern California knew, they should certainly have the right to do this. And as far as expanding this, perhaps going forward, if there are other situations where the facts are as egregious as they are in this case, that would happen. And it is my hope that every school and every institution that is given the trust of its students or its population, if they have not cared for their students or their population as they should, their duties to their congregants, what have you, will immediately recognize and proceed appropriately going forward, so this does not happen one more day in the future. I hope that will happen as well. And so those are my thoughts on this subject. I recognize there are points of view passionately on both sides, but this kind of thing has just got to stop. And if we give these victims the opportunity to seek their justice, I certainly feel that it's appropriate under these circumstances. And with that, I would open it to comments from my colleagues. Senator Monning, followed by Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the witnesses who spoke today. I would like to ask the author to respond to the concerns about the scope of the bill, as I think the chair began to ask. But if you could respond to the question about including all public institutions of higher learning.
Senator, I think it's really important to recognize the impetus for this bill. It is what was happening at USC. It is what happened over the period of 30 years. It is the victims of USC. The fact that this was a story that broke. It wasn't something that the university reached out to the victims and said, we found out this doctor has done this and we need to bring in all of the victims. It was a story that broke in the LA Times because of investigation showing that this was known by USC, and we have 14,000 women who were seen by this doctor, who was the only gynecologist in this student health center. This bill is very specific to those circumstances. And I think, as the chair has indicated, if we find that this has happened to that degree with the cover-up that we find at this university, then I think it would be our responsibility to respond accordingly.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez, followed by Senator Borges. Did you have a? Okay, very good. Senator Gonzalez.
Madam Chair, and thank you for sharing your stories. We really appreciate that. I know it must be very hard, and to come in front of this committee is very difficult, so thank you for that. I first want to ask about the fraudulent concealment reference that you'd made, and what, if anything, has been done about that. I know there have been reports of the decades of reports that have been reported, but nothing done, payments to the coach. But what can you explain on the fraudulent concealment and where that may take us?
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought.
Question. All right, to the author and then to the witness. Thank you.
And
Through the chair.
I would like to ask Holly Boyer, the attorney, to respond to that.
Hi. So a couple positions with the fraudulent concealment.
Would you identify yourself for the record,
Oh,
please?
yes, I'm sorry. Holly Boyer on behalf of the sponsor. One is that USC has actually taken the exact opposite position in litigation. They are seeking to dismiss and have been successful at dismissing claims where the plaintiffs have argued that delayed discovery or fraudulent concealment have stopped the statute of limitations. Both of these doctrines are fact-specific hurdles placed on a victim to establish that they were not on notice of their claim earlier. USC has pointed to facts of these victims where they say, oh, I sensed that something was wrong during this examination, to say, aha, you knew or should have suspected this was abuse, therefore you cannot take advantage of fraudulent concealment doctrine or delayed discovery to toll to the statute of limitations. So under their analysis, their fraudulent conduct doesn't even come into play. And it's because they're pointing to the type of and the nature of this abuse. AB 1510 gives these victims the opportunity to have their own action in state court. That's all this bill is seeking to do, is open that door.
Thank you. That clarifies everything for me. I appreciate that. And what I'll just say with that, and I think just to one other question, because I know in terms of the settlement, which is $215, it seems $1 million, yes, $215 million, which does seem like a drop in the bucket. I know that there are different tiers as well in terms of USC determining like who exactly would get what amount. So $2,500, $25,000, and $250,000. There's a 3-member panel that would decide that. So I just in hearing that today, I know that women who already feel a major distrust in this university would then have to go to this panel, I feel like is an extra burden. And for that reason, I feel the same way. You know, I really do. And so I would want to thank you again. And I hope, and with the support of many people that you've had here today, I hope that we can set a really good precedent here in the state where we do have additional victims that can come forward in various other educational capacities. So thank you.
Do you want to respond to that briefly?
I think that there's been a little bit of confusion about what actions the university has taken once allegations have risen. We distributed to all of your offices a letter that details very specifically the timeline of allegations made against Dr. Tyndall and the actions that USC took after each allegation and the subsequent actions. And also, just to remind, if this is a case about fraudulent concealment and if USC is being accused of engaging in that activity, this bill is not necessary to allow those women a remedy. There is a remedy in current law right now for those particular instances.
I think that was explained by the attorney previously. SC has fought this in the courts vigorously, denying behavior. It has not, I think even today, it has not demonstrated the kind of remorse and recognition that its victims believe is appropriate. So I think that's another reason that people believe that this is an inadequate settlement. So that's part of what this bill does. Very unique set of facts, very unique set of facts. And I think for some of us, that's really the reason we're willing to deal with the statute of limitations issue in this fashion. Senator Borges.
Thank you. And the chairwoman is correct. This certainly is a complicated, scary issue that riles the passions. As policymakers, I think it's incumbent upon us to make certain that we devise legislation and approve legislation that is applicable to the state. And my concern is when we have carve-outs or really unique boutique types of legislation, that it works against what I think our core mission is to look after the betterment of the state and all its residents. And I've heard some explanation as to why SC, and I'm certainly never going to defend SC in any capacity. If everything that I've heard is true, it's a horrific event. But I don't understand why we are not applying it as policy to all schools. And I know that my colleague posed that question, but I'm not certain I understood the response that I heard from the author of this. And maybe I'll give you another shot if you're interested. What is the harm in applying this to all universities? And is there something, are there political forces out there that are making this more difficult to do so?
I thought I had responded, but however, Senator, I will ask the attorney to give it a shot too.
So one of the, as the chairperson noted, it's because of the egregious nature of the 30 years, the 3 decades of abuse that occurred here that not only allowed and placed Tyndall in a position to sexually abuse these women time and time again, but also the cover-up as well. And similar to the church cases around 2002, when there was a limited 1-year revival provision for sexual abuse victims of those in those church cases, this bill targets the egregious conduct of USC, and it's necessary now. The passage is necessary now, both because, one, claims that have been filed are being dismissed based on these statute of limitations grounds, and the federal settlement that was referred to earlier by USC has an opt-out provision of November 7th. So if this bill is not provided to give these women the chance, they are denied the choice.
You're creating, with all due respect, you're articulating the procedural circumstance of SC. I'm looking upon the policy implications that should be borne by university systems across the state. And that's where I'm not finding satisfaction in this answer when we heard testimony, even from the chair herself, and I'll quote, any university to take immediate steps, and I totally agree with her. All universities. And if this is triggering a discrete area of time, then why not apply it across the board? You'll still achieve the same results, but we will send public policy in the right direction.
I think this bill is very specific as to time, and that is what the bill is. And if you would like to bring another bill, a different bill, that you certain, no, with all due respect, I'm responding, excuse me, I am answering your question. This is not a dialogue, I'm answering your question. This is a specific bill dealing with a specific set of issues. And I invite anyone who wishes to bring their own bill dealing with some other aspects of this. They have every right to do that. You do, Senator Borges. You can bring your own legislative package. That's what we do as legislators. This bill is very narrowly focused. The set of facts, the expansion of the statute of limitations is very limited to a particular set of facts. If there are other circumstances that come forward that have a set of facts that the author believes would justify this additional expansion of the statute, then that certainly is something that that would come to this committee for consideration. So,
continue on with my question?
Do you have a question?
I do.
All right.
One that you've not answered. The idea is, and we expect this in our committee and in our forum, that if something is different than what is proposed, then bring a subsequent piece of legislation forward. But my understanding is that this recommendation was made early and throughout the process. So I don't understand why this wasn't incorporated into it. What am I missing? What are the forces at play that is keeping this from occurring?
May I just say what an injustice this would be if we were to include other universities where the only one that comes to mind now is UCLA. This is just beginning for UCLA. USC's cover-up, USC's victimization has been, the victims have already been notified. They're part of a class action suit that has been over a year. They are now aware. If we now say, here's this window of opportunity, oh, sorry, you didn't hear about it, nothing we can do. It was a serious consideration. However, I believe that the circumstances, and I'm a Trojan. I received my education at USC. This was not an easy decision, even for myself. I stand with my sisters also who have been victimized in this manner. USC's actions in this case have provided the notice to the victims. There will be a 1-year reopening of the statute of limitations for those victims. And during that year, if they bring their claim, perfect. If they don't, the statute will have passed. If we were to extend this to every university, that would be such a disservice to them.
Thank you. I think you've answered the question now. Senator Monning, and then I think at this point we'll ask you to close and we will take a vote.
Thank you. Just briefly, I think that is the distinction here. For those who seek the same treatment to other universities, we want victims to have the full panoply of rights. This is tailored to a situation where there's already a settlement agreement, and we're trying to create a window for victims in this particular incident. That window for other victims in other universities, in essence, would be slamming the door on them to have the full course to run the possibility of seeking justice and their rights. There may be other instances where the injustice of what happened at USC is revealed. At that point, then it's appropriate to explore, does that warrant opening a window? This window is for victims at USC. This window applied to the state would be closing the door on potential remedies to other victims. I'd like to move the bill.
Thank you, Senator Monning. Assembly member, would you like to close?
Thank you for this robust conversation. I thank the victims for coming forward. It is extremely important to hear their voice. And with that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. The motion is due pass to appropriations. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
File item number 16, AB 1510, Jackson.
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Borges. Durazo. Gonzalez. Aye. Gonzalez, aye. Jones. Monning. Aye. Monning, aye. Stern. Stern, aye. Umberg. Wajkowski. 4-0.
All right, the vote count is 4-0. We'll leave the roll open. Thank you all very much for being here and for your testimony from all perspectives. I think it was very helpful to all of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you. All right, our final bill we're going to take a minute to just clear the room. And we'll take, that's quite all right, we'll take a minute to clear the room, give you all a moment.
The tough committee. I was watching you guys. Don't envy you.
Good afternoon. We are on our last item, file item 17, which is AB 1731. Hopefully we'll get our members back so that when we are done with this, we'll be able to vote on this item and close the rolls on others. So This is AB 1731, a real easy bill, too. We'll probably have some robust discussion about it. Looking forward to it. Assemblymember Berner Horvath, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and Senators. Today, it's my honor to present my bill, AB 1731, which appropriately regulates short-term vacation rental platforms in San Diego County's coastal zone as a 3-year pilot. I want to thank the Chair and the committee staff for constructive amendments, which I'm happy to accept today. We all know too well that California is in the midst of a statewide housing crisis, and you all know that local jurisdictions can regulate or ban short-term vacation rentals as they see fit. This is the responsibility of local jurisdictions, except in the coastal zone. In the coastal zone, the California Coastal Commission has the ability to regulate land use, but only as it applies to coastal access. They do not have the authority to balance coastal access with housing affordability, or in the case of full-time short-term vacation rentals, removing housing from the housing stock. Therefore, in California's coastal zone, the California Coastal Commission requires cities to have short-term vacation rentals, regardless of their affordability, and even in counties that do an exceptional job in providing low-cost coastal accommodations like San Diego County. San Diego County accounts for nearly 1/3 of the state's entire stock of low-cost coastal accommodation. That means 1 in 1,000 per 1,000 residents in San Diego County. This is far above the rest of the state in any other county. And so we do a good job of providing low-cost coastal accommodations. We do not have a coastal low-cost accommodation problem in San Diego County. But we do have a housing crisis exacerbated by the proliferation of short-term vacation rentals, which are removing housing from our housing stock, especially due to the popularity and ease through which they can be rented over short-term vacation rental platforms. And this is especially an issue when it inadvertently incentivizes full-time short-term vacation rentals over long-term rentals. We see that long-term rental rates increase, and it's just a simple supply and demand. If we all go back to Economics 101, we know what this is. Currently, there are about 14,000 short-term vacation rentals in San Diego County, most of which are full-time. We estimate there's approximately 5,000 full-time short-term vacation rentals in San Diego County's coastal zone. And when in the middle of a statewide housing crisis, will we allow the de facto demolition of 5,000 units in San Diego County's coastal zone and not have them be replaced? This means there are 5,000 units not available to buy or rent long-term for our families, seniors, veterans, or workers. Decreases supply, which we all know increases rent and housing prices. And remember, these units are counted in cities' RENA numbers for housing, not visitor-serving uses, which short-term vacation rentals fundamentally are. While not all of these rentals will be affordable, I think that it's important to realize they push higher-income folks down the housing market, which therefore causes displacement of our families, seniors, veterans, and workers. So to address this market disruption, I authored AB 1731, and it's narrowly tailored to appropriately regulate short-term vacation rental platforms in the San Diego County coastal zone. And I want to get at that because it's the short-term vacation rental platforms that are causing this massive market distortion. In Imperial Beach, which is one of our coastal communities, and it's also one of the poorest cities in the San Diego County, they used a lot of political capital. We all know it's hard to build in the coastal zone. And they approved a 200-unit multifamily development. 25 of those 200 units within 3 months are full-time short-term vacation rentals. I predict that it'll be 50 by the end of the year. Those were homes and apartments meant for folks. They were not meant to be visitor-serving uses. And that's what the proliferation and the success, really, of these short-term vacation rental platforms are doing to our housing market. And at some point, I think we have to be really honest. Do we have a housing crisis, or do we have a short-term vacation rental crisis? And I think we'd all agree we have a housing crisis. So at its core, AB 1731 allows legitimate home sharing while preventing the removal of housing from the housing stock due to full-time short-term vacation rentals and many hotels proliferating in the San Diego County coastal zone. If a primary resident is on site, they are excluded from the bill. If a city zones an area of residential tourism, they are excluded from the bill. If the primary resident is not on site, then the short-term vacation rental platform may book that unit for up to 30 days, and that if a user decides to platform hop, that's 90 days total per year. That includes almost every single weekend in a year or the entire summer. That's appropriate home sharing. That does not remove housing from the housing stock. And AB 1731 allows the return of much-needed transit occupancy tax to local jurisdictions. This is the tax that local jurisdictions use to accommodate the services needed for their tourist population. And this is critical to allow the impact of these short-term vacation rentals on the communities to be recovered by cities. It also allows local jurisdictions to compare who's renting out, who's gotten a permit, and compare that back to their local permitting process, something that can't be done right now. I'd like to also point out that the amendments taken in this committee means this is a 3-year pilot instead of the proposed 5-year pilot. And we will have a very important study at the end showing what the effect of the short-term vacation rental platforms are on the housing market in San Diego County's coastal zone. Specifically, I'm interested in 2 things, which is what's the effect on long-term rental rates and what's the effect on housing availability. These are things we can't know because there's no connection between the short-term vacation rental platforms and the individual permitting that happens at the city. This bill is also simple to implement. It requires platforms to add practically 4 checkboxes that would categorize a unit in the San Diego County's coastal zone as eligible under this bill. Are you the primary resident? Are you on-site or off-site? Are you a renter? And if you are, do you have permission from the landlord to rent as a short-term vacation rental? Right? It's a pretty simple bill. If those conditions are met, then it says 30 days maximum booking over the platform. Cities will receive this information from the TOT and be able to enforce per their local policies. AB 1731 protects property rights by appropriately regulating short-term vacation rental platforms rather than regulating property owners. So it's a little complicated to get, I think, for some folks to get their head around that. They can still rent, any of the property owners can still rent short-term vacation rental platforms as they did before the advent of these platforms. And that means they can rent them to family and friends, they can put a sign in front of their house, they can have their own website, and of course nothing stops any of the property owners from renting long-term or for 9 months. We have lots of students who are housing insecure. There's lots of folks that would rent it out during the school year, and then during the summer they could have that as their own individual use. And so on the issue of property rights, I'd like to point out that this bill does not regulate the use of residential home for a short-term vacation rental. That's the job of the city, but it only regulates the platform and how long the platform can book it. So as a point of fact, use of a residential home for a short-term vacation rental is not a vested property right. It's a visitor-serving use granted only if allowed by the local government via permitting, registration, licensing. It's not automatically vested in the homeowner. AB 1731 preserves local control by adding what I said before, the residential tourism provision. That's basically an opt-out provision of cities. If they wanted to, they could go in and say, do a residential tourism overlay, and then their entire city could have that in the coastal zone if they wanted. And AB 1731 also preserves coastal access beyond the low-cost coastal accommodation, which we're already really good at doing, by allowing the legitimate home sharing with primary residents on-site and then off-site for up to 90 days a year. I respectfully ask for your aye vote today on this important bill to address one part of the equation, and it is only one part. We do have other issues in the San Diego County Coastal Zone, but this does one part to really address the issue of housing affordability in the San Diego County Coastal Zone. And with me, I have 2 witnesses, and so Christy Buma and Sarah Flox.
Thank you. 2 minutes each, if you would.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Christy Baum on behalf of the California Professional Firefighters. I'll do it in 1 minute or less. 2 points. Public safety, these short-term rentals change the profile of a community and the service level demands on that community. So it's just a matter of public safety to address these issues. And tied to that and secondarily to that, having this information so that platforms can collect and remit the proper transit occupancy taxes to the localities. That is the revenue that is funding the services to these homes, and therefore we need to better have ability to audit and collect this revenue. We urge your support.
Next witness, please. Good afternoon.
Madam Chair, member Sarah Flox from the California Labor Federation. We represent members who work and live in these coastal zones and think this is a very modest bill, and it threads the needle and finds middle ground. It does protect people who want to supplement their income, who need to supplement their income by renting out spare rooms or cottages. They can do that. It leaves them be. What it does is it prevents practices, I would say abuse of these platforms that is fueling a housing affordability crisis. It is investors, LLCs, companies that are buying up properties in the coastal zone because people want a vacation there and then renting them out on these platforms. And essentially, because they're in areas that are zoned residentially, they are running illegal hotels, but without workers, without insurance, without any of the laws that prevent things like human trafficking, which hotels have been very good about obeying the posting and noticing who's coming in and out of these hotels. And if you look at just an informal survey of Airbnb in San Diego County, 50% of the hosts have multiple properties listed, which means these are probably companies that are buying up properties and then renting them out. In fact, if you look at the top hosts in San Diego County, some of them are Blue Water Vacations, Penny Realty. These are not families who just have a second home that they are renting out. And this is an impact on business, it has an impact on housing, it has an impact on things like restaurants, because people aren't going out because they're cooking in their Airbnb unit. So there are a lot of ripple effects. And there's a recent study that came out just responding to the analysis from UCLA and a researcher at USC that actually shows that when you have an increase in Airbnb rentals, rent does go up. And that effect is exacerbated when you have these non-owner occupied rentals, like what is happening in San Diego. So we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Other witnesses in support, name and affiliation, please.
Chair and members, Matt Broad for the Teamsters and Unite here in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair members, John Caldwell, California Hotel Lodging Association. We're in support.
Thank you. Witnesses, any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Come on down. Okay. 2 minutes each, please.
Thanks. And we'll do our best to hit it right on two, and I'll go first and let Dave speak after. My name is John Ross. I'm here on behalf of Airbnb. I have with me Dave Fletcher, who's an Airbnb host. He will read a letter when I conclude, submitted on behalf of Share San Diego and over 6,000 hosts statewide expressing their concerns with the bill. Fundamentally, we think this is a hard issue and a hard issue that should be resolved in San Diego by San Diegans. This bill has divided San Diego legislators, it's divided residents of the community, and we think that's the appropriate place for an issue such as this to be resolved. On the bill itself, I'd like to make a handful of points before I turn it over to Dave. First, this bill bans the rental of vacation homes in San Diego. If you're not a primary resident, and a primary resident is defined as one who lives in the home more days in a year than they live anywhere else, the bill does not let you use a hosting platform to rent your home. So if you live in Los Angeles and you have a home in San Diego and you use VRBO or Airbnb to rent that, periodically this bill says no. It does say that a primary resident can do it in limited circumstances if they are living there part-time. If they live there full-time, they have much more generous permissions. But for those who want to rent a vacation home, it says no. It preempts the ability of local governments to establish thresholds that they think are more appropriate than the thresholds set forth in this bill. Page 3, line 36, on page 3, line 36 through page 4, line 9, and then page 4, lines 10 through 15, lay out the caps that apply to rentals in San Diego under this bill, and they say that a local government cannot apply a cap that's greater than what is provided for in this bill. So in that way, it does say that local governments can exercise their own discretion. Why does that matter? Airbnb is currently collecting the transit occupancy tax in 18 counties, 43 cities, 3 cities within San Diego County. If the bill is successful and the intent is to restrict the use of short-term rental platforms in those areas, we are the ones who are collecting the TOT and providing it to local jurisdictions. You're going to push these transactions off the platforms where we currently collect the TOT pursuant to agreements with local government and reduce the revenue that's enjoyed currently by Oceanside, Carlsbad, and the city of San Francisco. On coastal access, to hit on the big point that I think, San Diego, I'm sorry, Senator, thank you. I appreciate the correction, as usual.
But you've gotten about 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
More verbose than I wanted to be.
That's all right. Try to wrap it up. We'll give you...
Okay, so on coastal access, and I think that's where the Assembly members started, the Coastal Mission has a charge to ensure that those who can't afford to live at the coast have the ability to visit the coast and stay in accommodations. As communities along the coast have attempted to restrict the ability of short-term rentals, the Coastal Commission has weighed in and said, no, in many cases that's not reasonable, it's overly restrictive, we need to tailor the particular permission in that community in a way that allows for short-term access to continue to...
Thank you. Thanks so much. And if you'd like to go ahead and read your letter, please, the floor is yours.
Jonah Mechanic, he's the president.
If you could speak into the...
San Diego.
Great.
Share San Diego is a coalition of short-term rental owners, managers, and property rights advocates in San Diego. As such, we oppose AB 1731 due to its devastating effects it will have on our region and local economy. For more than 100 years, San Diego has depended on short-term rentals. Our region's rich history of supporting these low-cost visitor accommodations have made our community a vibrant place, the one of California's top tourist destinations. Unfortunately, AB 1731 attempts to turn back the clock and make it more difficult for families to visit our beach communities by essentially banning unhosted short-term rentals. In 2018, our City Council voted to put into effect a similar law, which would have also restricted short-term rentals, and in less than 30 days, 62,000 registered voters signed petitions to stop this law from going into effect. AB 1731 would undermine the will of the local voters who have already opposed such heavy-handed restrictions. In 2017 study by research economist Alan Nevin founded that in San Diego alone, short-term rentals create nearly $500 million in economic activity and support more than 31,000 jobs. These are jobs that would not otherwise exist without those low-cost visitor accommodations. Additionally, the city collected more than $26 million in transient occupant taxes from these rentals in 2018 alone, helping pay for homeless programs, police, fire, and improvements to the local roads. With so much at stake for our region, I respectfully request the Judiciary Committee vote no on AB 1731 and keep San Diego a welcoming place for all visitors and help protect this vital part of our region's tourist industry.
Thank you very much. About 2 minutes on the button. Other witnesses in opposition, if you'd step forward with name and affiliation, please.
Good morning, Chair.
Oh, I hope not.
Oh.
It's a good afternoon, almost good evening.
My apologies. Kareem Dreesi on behalf of the California Association of Realtors in opposition.
Thank you, sir.
Vanessa Gonzalez on behalf of Expedia in opposition.
Thank you.
Tony LaGras, on behalf of the Central Coast Management Association, we oppose for small vacation rental managers who have been in existence for decades.
Thank you.
Les Shepard on behalf of the Cal Asian Chamber of Commerce in opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, let's bring it back to the dais. This is a very interesting bill. Senator Wojtkowski, we'll start with you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was at housing, and I'm not sure. The staff report talks about some confusing language about whether it's 30 days that the property could be rented or 30 days that it's on the host site. Were those clarified?
If you look at page 12, item 8, the proposed amendments, that clarifies it. And one of the other amendments also moves the sunset date to 3 years rather than 5 years.
And those have been accepted?
Yes.
Okay. Then I have a question of what is a residential tourist zone?
It's a zone that we typically have in San Diego County. Oceanside has it. And so it's an area that's designed to have short-term vacation rentals. And so, for example, half of the Oceanside coastal zone is in the residential tourism zone. And so that's why the mayor of Oceanside asked for that amendment, and we took that amendment to make sure that and that's the mechanism for the opt-out provision. So if they create a residential tourism zone or a residential tourism overlay over their coastal zone, they're opted out of the bill.
Okay.
Very good. Other questions? Senator Durazo?
Yeah. I've been exposed to this issue for a number of years, primarily because of the housing issues in Los Angeles. And this has been a very, very, gotten contentious at times, but I think as we step back and look at all of the elements that are impacting our housing stock, just housing availability, this has to be factually seen as a part of the cause of a housing shortage. Not the whole, not everything, but a part of. And we can't go from one room, talk about housing stock shortage and the emergency in housing availability, and then turn around and allow this to